You found Why We Are Christians. My name is Kent Philpott, and we're talking to Jay Judson. He happens to be on a road between Memphis and Nashville, Tennessee, sitting in a pickup truck, and we got him by Skype over his cell phone. Now, this is the second program, and we've been hearing about Jay, how he became a Christian. Welcome, Jay. Here we are for
Kent,
part two. Now, we've been through your early history. I'm interested, you're married.
Yes.
And what's your wife's
Got
name?
2 children.
What's her name?
Anna.
Anna. Do you have any kids?
Yeah, I got Jeremiah, who's soon to be almost 9, and then Mariah, she's 4.
So you got 9 and 4.
Yep.
And your wife's name is Ann. And you guys, what town do you guys actually live in?
Right now, we're just staying in near Boone, North Carolina.
Okay, so and that's right, North Carolina. That's where I've been used to calling you, North Carolina. Okay.
Yes. Yep.
And so what are you doing right now? What are you Are you waiting on something, or what are you doing?
We are headed back to Burma after New Year's, Lord willing, and we're just sharing our story about what God's been doing there in the Southeast Asian country of Burma, now called Myanmar. And we'd let people know what God's doing and invite them to join us and helping us, because we're seeing a lot of people, needy people, and they're coming to Jesus, and they need help.
Burma. So,
Yep.
Are you with an organization?
I was with several organizations, and then I've recently started, the past 3 years, started an organization, a ministry called Just Obey Jesus. Just Obey Jesus Coaches.
How did you get the word coaches?
We coach people behind the scenes to multiply disciples who make other disciples and start more churches that start more churches.
Okay. You're going back to Burma,
Yep.
and the new name is Myanmar.
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 Yes.
Myanmar.
Yep.
And Myanmar has been in the headlines for a year or two because of
Yes.
the problems between the Buddhists and the Muslims.
Yes, I've worked in that exact spot where all that's happening for the past 17 years.
Really? Could you tell us, let's imagine that you're going to speak to a group that knows nothing about this, and you're going to please explain to us what that's all about. Give us a basics on it.
Burma was a former British colony, and I went there. It's a pretty much Buddhist country with a Christian minority. It's kind of like shaped like the state of Texas. It's the size of the state of Texas, and it's shaped like a horseshoe. And on the outside of the horseshoe ring, there were a lot of Christian tribal groups that Judson had led to Christ indirectly, even though he was focused on the Buddhists that live in the central part of the country. In the lowlands, the Buddhists live, and they pretty much dominate the country. Burma is named for the largest ethnic group in the country. They're called Burma, kind of spelled like Alabama, but they call themselves Burma people, and Burma is a corruption of that word. And but there's over 300 ethnic groups in the country. Officially 135, but there's really over 300 completely different ethnic groups in the country, sandwiched in between China and India. And people ask me, what do they look like? I say they look half Chinese and half Indian. So there are ethnic groups there that look Indian. There are a lot of Indian descent people there, but there's also 2 million Chinese people that are now pouring into Burma. And it's the poorest country in Asia.
The poorest country in Asia.
Yep.
Not much in the way of industry or...
there's been a lot of sanctions the past decades that President Obama came in and lifted, and Hillary Clinton. And I'm thankful for that, but I think that was a bad move, because then the military dictatorship just went, as we say in Tennessee, went hog wild and just started killing everybody.
Now, tell me about the Buddhism, the form of Buddhism in Myanmar. What is
There's three.
the central theology of that kind of Buddhism?
There's three different types of Buddhism. There's the Northern Buddhism, the Southern Buddhism, and the Tibetan Buddhism. That's like the middle Buddhism. And the oldest form of Buddhism was the Southern Buddhism. And they call that Theravada Buddhism. That means the way of the elders. And that was the most ancient form of Buddhism. The Tibetan Buddhism, like the Central Buddhism, and the Northern Buddhism, the Mahayana Buddhism, would all say that, yeah, that's correct. Mahayana and Tibetan form of Buddhism started around the year AD 70 in Pakistan by a monk named Ashvaghosha.
Wow.
The same time that the Apostle Thomas is said to have preached the gospel in that same exact city.
Is that right?
In the same exact time. And so the newer form of Buddhism is salvation by grace through faith in a certain Buddha. And the older form of Buddhism is there's no grace at all. It's just all about works and about working your way out. And so I believe that Thomas's gospel that he preached about salvation by grace through faith actually affected Buddhism. When you really read the history of Buddhism, the Northern Buddhism doesn't really make sense. So it's very, very, very confusing. You got the fat, laughing, bald Buddha, the fat Buddha, and that's really coming from the Northern Buddhism. So the Burmese and the Thai got their Buddhism from Sri Lanka. The Sinhalese Buddhists down in Sri Lanka brought Buddhism into Southeast Asia, but they had been pushed out of northern India and went down into the island of Sri Lanka. So that's the progression of Buddhism that I didn't know any of this stuff when I went to Burma 17 years ago in 2002 after I finished up at Golden Gate. And I met a guy named the Major, and he's the one that really helped me understand about the Buddhist worldview and how to share the gospel. And he was very effective at sharing the gospel with Buddhists. After he got a little discipleship, he just took off.
Now, Jay, did you say that there was a form of Buddhism that had a concept of grace?
Yeah, the Northern Buddhism that started in the year AD 70, I believe was affected by the gospel of Jesus Christ. I'm not the only one that believes this. There's a mission professor at Reformed Theological Seminary in Atlanta, Georgia, who teaches the same thing, that the Northern Buddhism was affected by most likely by Thomas coming to India.
Right, that would make sense. Have you found then that people that were involved in that kind of Buddhism, we ever find any that actually believed in Jesus also?
Well, all the different branches of Buddhism teach about the coming and final Buddha.
Become a what?
The last and final Buddha. There's 5 Buddhas. The last Buddha who's yet to come, his name is the Lord of Compassion in English, Maitreya in Pali or Sanskrit.
So they will identify that 5th Buddha as Jesus?
We started to announce Jesus as very similar to that. I don't say he's the same, but I say he's very similar. It's very interesting, all the connections between Judaism and Christianity and Buddhism. There's lots of bridges there that the Major developed. He was also a lawyer, so I call it a lawyer's method for sharing with the gospel with Buddhists.
Now, how would you describe the life of a Buddhist? What kind of a religious life do they have? What does it look like?
They are very enslaved to the monks, the elders, the Theravada, the Theras. They are very enslaved to these guys, and these guys are pretty much like the middlemen in the business of religion. And every Buddhist male is required to become a monk. So Burma has the most monks out of any Buddhist country. I believe that's right. Over 500,000 monks in the country of Burma. And so everybody goes and donates to them. They live in gold palaces, basically, with gold everything everywhere. Very wealthy, very well taken care of. People literally worship them in order to get merit, in order to go to nirvana. And so the way that the Major started to share the gospel is that Jesus is the way to the golden city of nirvana.
Oh, I see. Okay. So there's a Buddhism that has a belief in deity. Whoop.
Yeah, I'm still here. Sorry.
We just lost. This is important to us. Where we live, there's a lot of Buddhist people who, it's kind of an
Yes.
American version of Buddhism. So this Buddhism you're talking about, that they have a belief in a deity.
Yeah, they believe that Buddha is the Almighty One, that he achieved that.
That he
And
achieved.
the books on Buddhism are not, what has been written about Buddhism is very confusing because it totally disagrees with the way most Buddhist people live.
And then then there's another Buddhism that it's a way of life and it does not have a belief in a deity. Is that right?
Yeah, that's really the high educated Buddhists who would say it's atheistic. Most Buddhist people, 95% of them, believe that Buddha achieved godhood.
Okay, so all right. So I know that there's a theistic and an atheistic Buddhism.
Yeah.
Yes, okay. So that
When you view it as a philosophy, it's an atheist thing, but when you really understand what people live out in their daily life, they absolutely worship Buddha. And American Buddhism, it's been twisted. I call it Hollywood Buddhism, or Richard Gere and Tina Turner Buddhism. Tina Turner's actually from my home county.
yeah.
She became a Buddhist. And what I call Richard Gere Buddhism is they think that coming back again and again and again is a good thing.
Yeah.
But according to Buddhism, the reason why you come back is because you're a dirty, rotten sinner.
Okay.
So they don't want to, no Buddhist, no Hindu wants to come back again. They don't want to be born again.
No. Now,
We announced to them that Jesus says you must be born again, and they say, well, that's nice, but I don't really want that. But sometimes they can't verbalize that.
right.
But that's what they believe. They don't want to come back.
No.
The goal of Buddhism is to go to nirvana and to get out of that cycle of sin and suffering.
Well, a very small population of Hindus in Burma.
There's about 1 million. Yep.
Do they get along with each other? Okay.
Indian people look down on the Southeast Asians, and the Southeast Asians look down upon the Indians. And it's Adoniram Judson that said it's ironic that the Burmese worship an Indian, but they hate Indians.
Mm. Now, is there ever physical, violent conflict between them?
Yeah, there's a violence right now that's happening between the people who look like Indians that are actually Muslim called Rohingya and the Buddhist background people. And my friend, the Major, he's the one that's built the gospel bridges and shared the gospel with his Muslim neighbors as a Buddhist background believer. And his whole family's become actively involved in loving their Muslim neighbors, and it's opened up a door for 45,000 Muslims that come to know Jesus.
Now, I was just going to get to the Muslims in Myanmar or Burma. Is it Sunni or Shia Islam?
Most of them are Sunni.
Most are Sunni. Okay.
Yeah.
Do they govern themselves by Sharia law?
Yeah, pretty much.
Pretty much. So they have a government apart from the government.
Yeah, they would still be considered nominal, but really how they govern their family lives and their religious organizations is still Sharia.
Now, in the news in past months have been stories of the conflict between the Buddhists and the Muslims, and as I understand it, it's the Buddhists rising up against the Muslims, and Muslims have been fleeing Burma. Is that true?
Yeah. In 2012, it really started then, and they really fought between each other, and the Muslims killed the Buddhists. All my Buddhist friends would like me to tell you that. The Muslims are not completely innocent as the media has portrayed. They killed many Buddhist people. I know that for a fact. But they also were the losers in this conflict, and then the fighting erupted again in August 2017, and 800,000 Rohingya Muslims were pushed over into Bangladesh. And we've been in there trying to help do food distribution and water purification systems and passing it out through the local believers. And wherever each side is helping each other, the level of violence is going significantly down, and the gospel of Jesus is going out through the love and just by helping their neighbors. It's really beautiful what God's doing there.
Now, what happens? I'm going to ask this about Muslims and Buddhists. What happens to, let's say, a young man or a young woman who is Buddhist in that Buddhist-dominated culture, and they become a Christian? How is that? What happens then?
Well, what we do is we practice these principles that I learned from this guy named Dr. George Patterson, who wrote a book called Church Multiplication Guide. That's the cover of it right there.
Okay.
And we help them stay in their context where they're at. We don't pull them out into our networks and pull them to a centralized location. We just send the gospel stories through picture Bibles into their home, and they are occasionally persecuted. But when we go to the leadership of the family first and witness to the whole family, then the level of violence and the level of persecution goes way down. But if they do come to Christ as a young person or isolated away from their family before they can decide to follow Christ, they are very persecuted.
So that's with the Buddhists. Do they feel threatened? Do they feel insecure about their faith?
Yeah, the Buddhist monks will get on the intercom over the whole village and announce that so and so has become a follower of Jesus, and that's the reason why they've now got heart problems or they got cancer, and you shouldn't follow Jesus because you'll get sick like these people have gotten sick.
What is it like with the Muslim people? How do they respond?
We've seen tremendous response among Muslim people. I've personally led lots of Muslim people to Christ, and it's a joy to see them so hungry for the truth. And then if you give them an option of being discipled in a small group or a small house church, then they'll take off and they'll multiply like rabbits with the gospel. And they understand. And we share the gospel. We call it the Camel's Method that I learned from my friend Kevin Greason. And it was C is Isa was chosen from the 3rd chapter of the Quran as an outline. I think it's verse 45 through 52, possibly, in the 3rd chapter of the Quran. Muhammad said that Isa, that's what he calls him in the Quran. His Quranic name is not Yeshu, but it's Isa. And Isa is chosen of Allah. He is born, he's anointed, he's the Messiah. They call him Isa al-Masih. And Masih means Messiah, and then you ask them, what does Masih mean? They don't know, so you tell them it means anointed. He's the anointed one. And the M in the camel, an acronym, is he was born of a Virgin Mary, and then he gives you eternal life, E-L. Muhammad said all this in the 3rd chapter of the Quran.
Wow, wonderful.
So I really like Muhammad. Muhammad's a great guy. And we should have respect for Muhammad because he pointed to a man named Isa al-Masih, who is the closest prophet to Allah. He is the closest one. He is the coming back to judge the world in the city of Jerusalem. And every Muslim and every Christian will stand before Isa al-Masih as our judge on Judgment Day. And we should get to know him because he's the Messiah of the world.
Wow. Well, here's where our ministries cross paths here in this. Really on the front lines here. I mean, you've got you're dealing with a Hindu minority, you've got a large Buddhist majority, and a Muslim significant population.
Yep.
Can you give me some individual stories?
A lady named Fan, she had been doing some prostitution in order to make money for her family because her husband was a lazy drunk. And so she came down to the big city looking for him. That's where she met the Major and I. And she heard about a man named Jesus who would never leave her. And she said, according to my religion, Buddhism, I'm going straight to hell for what I've done. Because Buddhists are firm believers in hell. Unlike, most American Buddhists. Buddhists and real Buddhism have pictures of hell everywhere. And so she knew she was going there, and she needed to be forgiven of her sin. And so we told her about Jesus, and she said, "I'm in. There's nobody else offering forgiveness for bad girls like me." A Buddhist woman believes that she has to be reborn as a man in order to go to nirvana and get salvation. And so she knew there was no hope for her. And so she followed Jesus. We discipled her, and she came to Christ in August. We discipled her in September. We showed her the vision for starting these tiny little discipleship groups, house churches that do baptism. I said, "You baptize people and you do the Lord's Supper." By Christmas, Phil, she had 14 churches going in 4 months after she got saved.
Jay, wow. Wow, I'm so glad we're talking together, man.
I said, "Tell me exactly what you did. Tell me exactly what you did." And she said, "Sunday morning, people come to my house church, and my daughter tells them a Bible story with these picture Bibles that we use. We use picture Bibles with Asian-looking Jesus with no beard." And so her daughter tells the picture Bible stories, and then the mother, Fan, she asks the questions that pulls out the truths from the stories in the Bible, and as people interact and have discussion. And then she says she asked them to go back the same day and repeat the same story with these picture Bibles in their house. So like, an hour or two later, they'll repeat the same experience they had at her house church in their house. And she said the gospel went out of my house like a waterfall, like a cascading waterfall. And I said, "I'm going to tell everybody on this planet what you just told me, because I know professional Christians, missionaries, and church planters and pastors who've never started 14 churches." And she said, "What's wrong with them? Don't they know Jesus? Don't they know what Jesus wants us to do?" And I said, "I don't think they do." So we just tell people who is Jesus and what Jesus wants them to do. He said, "Teach them to obey all my commandments." And so that's what we're doing. We're helping them obey all of his commandments, not just 98% of his commandments. So we say to women, "You're supposed to go out and baptize. You're supposed to go out and take the Lord's Supper out into other people's homes, not just get baptized, but become a baptizer."
Now, Jay, signs and wonders. Are you seeing signs and wonders there?
We are seeing people, ears opened up, blind or seeing. We've seen 3 people raised from the dead.
3 raised from the dead.
Raised from the dead.
I'm for it. I have
crazy,
a similar theology to yours.
Oh man, these crazy people actually believe this stuff. They actually believe this Jesus guy.
Yes.
He says in Luke chapter 10, he says, "Heal the sick, raise the dead, drive out demons." It's just like entry level 101, entry level to missions 101 with Jesus.
That's right. That's true. Only Jesus cast out demons, and our culture is becoming so pagan, so shamanistic, so occult oriented that Satan's just having a field day, and it drives people in terrible directions. And they need to see, and I'm saying this as to as wide as audience as possible, only Jesus Christ can cast out demons, and he's given his followers authority to do so.
Yes.
Exactly. That's exactly how it goes. Jay, we've only got 2 minutes.
Do I have time to share?
I want you to say.
Do I have time to share?
I want you to say the most important stuff you want to say. If there's anything you haven't gotten out, I want you to say it now.
Yeah. Well, for the people there in Marin County, California, where it's majority Buddhist, I thought sharing about the lawyer's method for how to share the gospel with Buddhist people would be appropriate. So the 4 noble truths of Buddhism is in every branch of Buddhism. It's in every book on Buddhism. It's the heart of what Buddha taught. The first noble truth is that you get born, you get old, you get sick, you die. It's suffering, the cycle of suffering. You get born, you get old, you get sick, you die. And Buddha taught that as an assumption that everybody, believed already, because Buddhism was a reformation out of Hinduism. It's reformed Hinduism. without the caste system. And then Buddha taught number two, the second noble truth that is somebody called it noble in English. I don't know why they called it that. The second noble truth is the reason why, the cause and effect. The reason why you have death and suffering is because you have sin. And Buddha describes sin as a black fire burning inside of everybody, even in himself. He said he had desire, these evil cravings is sin. And so he said the effect of that cause is death. The wages of sin is death. Sound familiar?
Yeah.
So that's what Buddha taught, cause and effect. The third noble truth that Buddha taught, the third one, is that there is a place where there's no more sin and no more suffering. It's called nirvana, the cessation of suffering. The old understanding of nirvana was that it was a place. In a Buddhist book called The Questions of King Minhala, in the Buddhist canon, in some countries it's in the Buddhist canon, some countries it's not, the king was asking a Buddhist monk, and the Buddhist monk said that nirvana was a place in one of the oldest Buddhist scriptures. The new definition of nirvana means annihilationism. But we're bridging the gospel to those Buddhists who believe it was a place. But whatever, Jesus wants to set you free from the cycle of sin and suffering. In heaven, heaven is the bridge. There's no more tears in heaven, is what Eric Clapton sang in his song. There's no more tears. There's no more suffering in heaven. Don't you want to go there? And then the fourth one is how you do it. The key to get out of the cycle, to have no more sin, and to go to nirvana, is that you have to do these eightfold path. The eightfold path is perfect mind. That's like mindfulness. They're always talking about mindfulness. Perfect mind, perfect actions, perfect speech, perfect. I can't remember all 8. But basically, you must be 100% perfect. That is what Buddha taught. I like Buddha. He's great. Because in the eightfold path, you can see that we have absolutely no hope of ever achieving nirvana or getting salvation. So the bad news is what Buddha taught. The law of Buddha is the bad news. The good news, once they understand the bad news and they really understand it, that they have no hope, then they're ready for the good news.
Jay, we're done.
All right.
We've reached to the end of the second part of Why We Are Christians, our conversation with Jay Judson. I hope you'll be looking for more programs on Why We Are Christians. So long.